Right. Let's get into it. Our wetlands are back on, and they are doing a phenomenal job already. You can probably see lots of things out in our natural habitats starting to green up. Our vegetation is starting to come back, and all the good microbes in our sediment and soils out there are starting to wake up with the warming temperatures. So this is a good thing. Wetlands got turned on officially April 1st. As of sort of the last part of April, flow rates are looking pretty good for this time of year. As we progress throughout the season, those flow rates will get increased as the wetlands get a little bit more mature from a vegetative and microbial standpoint, and our nutrient cycling ticks up. They can handle a little bit more water. But for right now, we're doing pretty well. The improvements that you've heard about for the last year or so out at Prairie Creek have been phenomenal. We now have a brand new, larger than ever settling pool to help us remove extra heavy sediments before they sort of pass through the wetland. So if you haven't had a chance to go out to the Prairie Creek wetland, kind of over by the covered bridge over at Kittle Road, please go check that out. Walking trails around there. But yeah, Prairie Creek's been a big success this year, so we're eager to see how it performs throughout the rest of the year. As many of you know, that particular site, the pumping rates have had to get dialed back the last couple of years for a variety of reasons. And so we're optimistic and hopeful that the improvements that have been finished this year are going to allow us to maintain a pumping schedule of, or a treatment schedule of about 1.5 to 2 million gallons a day, and we're on track to hit that. The rest of the wetlands, again, are doing really, really well, and those pump rates should go up as the growing season continues. Beaver Creek is another one to keep an eye on. Beaver Creek was actually Teresa Dirksen, the Director of Natural Resources for the county, secured funding to double the amount of water moved through that site. That's going to be done through a grant that's going to pay for an extra additional pump, so we can double the amount of water treated from Beaver Creek. So we're doing pretty well on volumes of water. That is 319, correct? So that's a Ohio EPA grant coming from the 319 program. We're very, very grateful for their continued support.
What's the 319 program?
The 319 program is a statewide program, and there's a little bit of federal money in there as well. But it's a water quality program that is spearheaded by the Ohio EPA, and it allows different sorts of improvement projects to take place. So pumping water for a treatment wetland, building a treatment wetland
What source?
from the state of Ohio.
No, where's the water coming from?
Oh, in this case, it's coming from Beaver Creek, coming directly from Beaver Creek.
Or is it coming from or going to?
Both. Water's getting removed from Beaver Creek, and then the outflow, the clean water, is getting put back into Beaver Creek. And so we have, a tremendous number of nutrients in that particular system. So this takes
That water that's being taken will be treated and go right back.
That's exactly right. Go right back. And then ultimately, when Beaver Creek flows into the lake, it will have been, it'll be cleaner than if that wetland didn't exist. So, yeah, we're excited about that. To give you a sense of some of the sort of cleanup of the water that we're looking at, obviously we're focused on nutrients and sediment. These are the things that fuel the harmful algal bloom in the system. You can see just a smattering of, water in, water out, sediment in, sediment out, that kind of stuff. But overall, if you look across the wetlands, this is how we're doing. The water that goes through the wetlands right now, and these numbers are going to get better throughout the summer, but they're currently removing about 68% of the nitrogen, about 62% of the phosphorus, and about 21% of the sediment. So every single bit of water that passes through these wetlands, and it's not just a few gallons, we're talking right now millions and millions and millions of gallons, and that number is only going to go up. We're seeing some great load reductions, and we're looking forward to continuing to share these with you guys throughout the season. If you're interested in more wetland work, this is a new paper that was published in the journal Nature Scientific Reports. This is an open access journal, so it's, as with all the work that we do, it's free for you to access, download, read. But this particular paper, this just came out a couple of months ago, and this looks at the long-term water quality improvements associated with Prairie Creek wetlands that we just got done talking about. So if you're interested, just Google Grand Lake, Prairie Creek, maybe my name, Teresa's name, and you'll see that paper and be able to take a look at that. These scientific papers that we publish and that we talk about and point out to everybody, these are important milestones for the restoration efforts in Grand Lake St. Mary's. It elevates it from just a local effort, and it transitions these phenomenal restoration efforts into something that can positively impact more than just us. It can positively impact the state of Ohio, the Midwest, and the rest of the country, and potentially even on a more global scale, because there are plenty of people around the world that read these things and they can gain ideas. They can learn from our failures and they can learn from our successes, and we can have cleaner water as a result
Isn't this for the
around.
wildlife as well?
This is absolutely for the wildlife.
Isn't that like one of the more main focuses?
Yeah, so the question was, why do we build these wetlands? What are we really benefiting? Wetlands have a myriad of benefits, and while the sort of first pass as we talk about these wetlands is often nutrients and sediment reduction, that's really a function of us trying to reduce the nutrients available for the harmful algal bloom. But the reality is wetlands play a vital ecosystem role in helping wildlife by providing habitat. The natural habitat of wetlands in the state of Ohio has dropped quite a bit. If you look back at old land surveys from the 1700s and early 1800s, you will find that the state of Ohio lost, if you go towards sort of the 1990s and 2000s, you'll find that the state of Ohio lost about 90% of its natural wetland habitat. Lost 90% of its wetland habitat. The watershed of Grand Lake lost more than 90% of its natural wetland habitat. And so by restoring these habitats, you can increase all of the benefits that are associated. One of the big ones is wildlife and plant life. These are, again, vital habitats that all but disappeared. So the number of species is going to vary depending on what group you're talking about, if you're talking about amphibians or reptiles or birds. But if you look at, what's that?
How about our bats in particular?
The bats in particular, yeah, absolutely, it's going to help those. Any kind of natural habitat that improves wildlife habitat lifts whole ecosystems. There are some great websites that you can go to. The iNaturalist app is a phenomenal website and an app program that people can upload observations, and so you can see the biodiversity at these sites, because there's plenty of people out there that identify things, take pictures, load them onto these websites, and you can get a really good idea of the wildlife habitat. In addition, these wetlands also help to improve our groundwater. They recharge our groundwater with clean systems. They also help to mitigate the effects of flooding by providing water a place to go. So these are all phenomenal things. As we transition from talking about the wetlands, talk about the lake, here's an update on the algal community. We will begin with the algal toxin level. That black line is the historical average. The green line is where we're at. Unfortunately, our year so far, we are tracking the historical average instead of being below it. We've been below it a few weeks, but largely we're tracking that historical average. And a couple of weeks ago, we saw a fairly large spike in algal toxin. The spike took us up to about 66 or 67 micrograms per liter. It has since come back down to just over 20 micrograms per liter. And so we saw a big spike. It's come back down. We are optimistic that we can stay back down. But logically, whenever you see a spike like that, we all have questions. I've got questions. You've got questions. Why did we just see that spike? We haven't seen a spike like that in probably 7 or 8 years. And so what happened? Exactly what was going on last week that sort of caused that? And when we look at an entire lake, it's a big system, and there are a lot of possible mechanisms in play. One of those mechanisms is the amount of algae cells that are out there. In Grand Lake St. Mary's, the algal biomass often tracks the toxin levels because it's the algae that are producing the toxins. Now, algae don't necessarily have to produce toxins, but the more algae cells you have, the greater the odds are that some or all of them are going to start to produce toxins. And so while it is possible for a small algae bloom to produce large amounts of toxins, in Grand Lake St. Mary's, more often than not, the number of algae cells out there track pretty closely the number of toxin molecules that are produced. So as we look at biomass, what can we tell? This black line goes all the way back to 2019 when we started tracking algal biomass. And this is particularly the algal biomass that is the cyanobacteria that can produce the toxins. You can see spikes and you can see valleys. You can see peaks, you can see valleys. The peaks, no surprise, are during the summer months. The valleys are during the winter months. I've circled two very critical pieces to help explain what is leading into this year, this recreation season. The first peak I want you to pay attention to is the one that says winter. That peak, or that, sorry, that not peak, that valley is this past winter. You will notice that every winter the algae community goes down, and this shouldn't surprise anybody. We get ice on the lake, the water cools, there's fewer nutrients, there's less sunlight, cyanobacteria like warm water. For all these reasons, the algal community goes down during the winter. That's not surprising. What is particularly surprising about this winter is the fact that this particular winter, our algal community did not go down as far as it traditionally does. So if you look at where that trough is, it's not quite as low as in, the 4 or 5 past winters. So our algal community didn't drop as far as it typically does. More than that, when it did drop, it didn't stay dropped. And so you look at those valleys, and those valleys often sort of come down, and then they stay low, and they bounce around low for a little bit, and then they come back up gradually during the spring. Our valley this past winter dropped down, not as far as in the past, and it did not stay down. It didn't stay down for more than a week or two, and it did not come up gradually. It came up fast. It spiked. Within a couple of weeks, we saw a biomass. Last week, it peaked, coinciding, not surprisingly, with that high toxin level. That biomass level peaked, and it peaked at a level that is as high as anything we've ever seen in Grand Lake, again, since we started monitoring in 2019, the biomass. Now, if you were to go back to 2012 and some of those early years, 2010, with some of the really massive algal blooms, I promise the biomass would have been a little bit higher. But this data set just goes back to 2019, so we're working with what we got. We know so much about the biomass for all these years, in part because of some instrumentation that was purchased by some local Rotary clubs, as well as through a partnership with the Lake Improvement Association. So a big thank you. Without these groups supporting water quality labs in the region, we wouldn't know what we know. But what we see is that last week our biomass peaked. Our biomass came down a tremendous amount in the past week. In terms of why would it peak and then all of a sudden crash back down? Again, it's a big lake, and this is 2 or 3 weeks worth of data, and so it's impossible to disentangle an exact mechanism. But whenever you get a very large surge of biomass, the potential for competition ramps up, and that's competition amongst individual algal cells. Competition for light from the sun, competition for space, competition for nutrients. And so when we see that big biomass surge, it's unsurprising that there is a little bit of competition, things come down a little bit. It would be great if that came down a little bit more, and it would be great if that took the toxin levels with it as well. Now, there are other potential explanations for why we're seeing elevated toxin levels. There's an awful lot of text here. We're not going to spend all day lecturing on it, but this is available on the LAA website, so if you want to go back later and check it out, I encourage you to do so. But the algal biomass is being fueled by toxin levels, or being fueled by nutrient levels. And those nutrient levels are coming from runoff patterns and things like that. And so it might be prudent to talk about some of the weather patterns that we have been seeing over the past year. We had a tremendous drought in the fall and winter, and that drought has only recently stopped. We've had fairly high precipitation for the months of March and April. Our precipitation for March was about 150% of normal. Our precipitation for April is about 210% of normal. So we've had quite a bit of rain, but anybody that's paying attention to the lake level can tell you that that rain hasn't exactly translated into a huge amount of raising of the lake level. It has not translated into a tremendous amount of runoff in the streams. In fact, our daily average discharge, when we look at the amount of water in our streams and we compare that to the long-term average going back for close to a decade now, what we see is that our flows are about normal. So we've had higher than normal precipitation. We have had lower than normal, if not normal, runoff rates in our actual creeks. And so what we can tell from that is that what's going on in the lake right now is not necessarily an influx of water. Even though we've had a little bit more rain this March and April, because it's coming on the tail end of such a dry spell, that's unlikely to be driving some of these mechanisms. What could be part of this biomass and unique toxicity that we're seeing this particular year is in part because of some of those droughts. Whenever you have droughts, you have dry soils, there's a difference in the chemistry that's happening there. That's potentially a part of that. When we talk about long-term runoff and we talk about nutrients, the two graphs you see there, nitrogen is on the top and soluble phosphorus is on the bottom. These are long-term graphs that track the amount of nutrients coming into our lake. And these particular graphics, they go back to 2009, carry all the way up to the present. One of the most amazing things that you can see is just how much of a drop we have seen in our phosphorus. That graph there on the bottom, that's exactly the directionality that we want to see. It's absolutely incredible. And this is a testament to the phenomenal best management practices happening on the landscape today. Because that's where that phosphorus is coming from. It's coming from the landscape, and so this is a great thing to see. We see really, really steep declines in phosphorus leading to our lake. And phosphorus is relevant. It fuels the biomass of the HAB. Nitrogen is also relevant. Nitrogen also helps to fuel the biomass. Unfortunately, nitrogen also fuels the toxicity. The microcystin toxin molecule is almost exclusively made of nitrogen atoms, which means it's relevant to take a look at nitrogen as well. You'll notice that beginning in 2009, 2010, when this data set was constructed, we're at our highest point. Following the distressed watershed rules, following that time period with lots of best management practices, we see those nitrogen values drop. And they drop quick, and it's impressive. And they reach the bottom of their trough right about 2017, 2018. Right about that point, though, we start to see a little bit of an uptick, a disturbing uptick, and that trend continues to today. That trend is not independent of some of the weird weather patterns that we've been seeing for the last 3 or 4 years. That trend is something we're actively looking at, investigating, and working on. But we'd like to see those numbers drop back down from the watershed, obviously, this year. I'll also point out that trend in elevated nitrogen. That's not something that is only being seen in Grand Lake St. Mary's. That's being seen around the state of Ohio, particularly Northwest Ohio. That is unlikely to be the function of 1 or 2 individuals. That's likely to be the function of something larger happening, some sort of unique climatic interaction with the chemistry of our watershed and watersheds beyond Grand Lake. And again, it's something that it's not just us here in Grand Lake looking at, it's many other folks.
What's your theory on that?
I don't have a good one. I think the climate patterns and the drought have the distinct potential to alter the way soils hold certain nutrients.
And their heat that they give off?
I think the conversation about data centers is probably independent of this particular nitrogen and phosphorus trend. But if you're asking if you have a mechanism to heat groundwater and heat surface water to a tremendous degree, depending on where that's happening, that can have negative consequences.
Especially if it's dotted all over Ohio.
Well, again, depending on where it's located, that can have negative consequences. You know, if you have something next to a, really healthy cool water stream, and you put a bunch of warm water into it and raise that temperature up, that can be a problem. And there are some systems around Ohio that might be facing just that issue.
Oh, that heat goes off about 6 miles, so we're in a radius up and down, all around.
Sure,
That 6 miles is gonna go out,
sure,
and then you got others that are doing it.
sure. Yeah,
So I just feel there's a lot more here at stake with our ecosystem, and you were talking about the drought, that concentrate the levels in this lake, and only what we're getting, what has been only, replenished just this year isn't enough to replenish 3 years worth of loss.
yeah.
And that's where you're gonna get your concentrations, that's probably why you have that spike.
If that was the case, that would probably,
It got up to 80 degrees. It got up to 80 degrees, but like last week, y'all did, yard work, felt great, put some shorts on. That was unusual, 80 degrees.
what's interesting about this this graphic, one of the interesting things, in addition to what you're mentioning, is nitrogen and phosphorus typically track each other pretty closely. What we're seeing here is the two of them diverging. We're seeing phosphorus continuing to go down. We're seeing nitrogen start to climb up. Again, that points to something larger than a single individual or a couple of single individuals, and it's something that we need to disentangle and figure out. But it's not something that's just here in Grand Lake. I want to emphasize that. This is something that's getting picked up around the state. And it's something that, as I learn more, I'm always so happy to get an invite to share that information. As I learn more, you guys will learn more. Speaking of which, if anybody has any questions about what we're seeing this year or wetlands or anything like that, let's hear it. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for listening.
I do have some questions, I really do.
Sure. We probably have time for one or two questions.
I am concerned with the influx of what can happen to our ecosystem. And I did touch on there being like 6 miles. Take that in for a minute. How many, this lake is, from the middle, is it 6 miles out? Like, how far out from an area that, that this can really do a number on our bat population? Because I believe that we're at a 90% loss, and we have 10% left
90% loss of
of our bats.
our bats. I'm not aware of exactly what that statistic is, but yes, bats have declined quite a bit as a function of habitat loss, as a function of disease, which can propagate through bat population.
Don't they? With the, like,
No, I'm saying disease
have
is one of the
that
reasons
West
bat
Nile.
populations have declined.
the bats have declined.
Yeah, disease is one of the reasons for that. Things
The
like white nose.
syndrome.
That's
And
exactly right.
We don't even know what has happened to our habitat, like them coming out of hibernation, and we don't even know what our numbers are for this year.
That's
But
unfortunate.
We do have got something that is so vital to our ecosystem.
Yep, no, bats are incredibly vital, and the restoration efforts in Grand Lake St. Mary's are so very critical to helping to maintain healthy bat populations, as well as improve and maintain healthy reptile, amphibian, bird, macroinvertebrate populations.
Who
These
heads that
systems are
department up?
wonderful. Who heads which
Who
department up?
heads that department up for the bat conservation? Is there?
That would
anybody-
be through the ODNR, through the Division of Wildlife. And our next speaker, Dave Failer, might be able to point you in that direction of exactly who that is.
All right,
All right?
all right.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.